Have you ever wondered why it feels like we are stuck in a never-ending circle of protests and demonstrations? From the streets of Lagos to the hills of Ebonyi State and all over Nigeria, it seems like we are constantly demanding for change. But is it really working? Let's take a trip down memory lane and revisit the 7 major protests that shaped Nigerians' history. From the June 12 annulment to the End SARS movement, we will explore how these protests impacted the masses and why it feels like history is repeating itself. Join us on Ebonyi People TV as we uncover the patterns, the lessons, and the unanswered questions. Is Nigeria doomed to repeat its mistakes? Or can we learn from the past to build a better future? Let's dive in and find out. This is Ebonyi People TV.
My people, keep watching Ebonyi People TV. People should keep on watching Ebonyi People TV.
Keep watching Ebonyi TV.
They are very, very good people and they are doing good.
Please, I want to urge you to keep watching Ebonyi People TV.
Ebonyi People TV is the best. All right, people. But I don't see them now.
It's a place you be where you get a current news and undiluted news.
Keep watching Ebonyi State TV. Not all that by you. If you touch, if I come on remote, I'll come back for that remote.
The Aba Women's Riot of 1929. In the sleepy provinces of Calabar and Owerri, a spark of resistance ignited a firestorm of defiance that would shake the foundations of British colonial rule. Thousands of fearless Igbo women, armed with nothing but their voices and determination, rose up against the oppressive policies of their colonial masters. This was the Aba Women's Riot of 1929, a pivotal moment in Nigerian history that would become a beacon of feminist and anti-colonial resistance. But what led to this unprecedented uprising? The roots of the riots lay in the introduction of indirect rule by Lord Lugard in 1914, which appointed warrant chiefs to govern locally. These chiefs quickly became notorious for their cruelty and abuse of power. The final straw came when colonial administrators announced plans to tax the Igbo market women, who were the backbone of the local economy. The women knew that they had to act fast to protect their livelihoods and their communities. In November 1929, the women converged on native administration centers, using traditional songs and dances to shame the warrant chiefs and colonial officials. They forced chiefs to resign, attacked European-owned stores, and even broke into prisons to release fellow protesters. But their bravery came at a cost. Colonial police and troops opened fire, killing over 50 women and wounding many more. Yet, the Aba Women's Riot achieved something remarkable. It forced colonial authorities to abandon their plans to tax the market women and curb the power of the warrant chiefs. The uprising also paved the way for administrative reforms, including the appointment of women as warrant chiefs. The impact of the riot was felt far beyond the streets of Calabar and Owerri, inspiring future generations of Nigerian women to stand up for their rights and challenge oppressive power structures. The Abeokuta Women's Revolt of the 1940s. In the bustling city of Abeokuta, a quiet storm was brewing. The Abeokuta Women's Union, AWU, was leading a fierce resistance against the Nigerian colonial government's unfair taxation policies. The women of Abeokuta were determined to challenge the status quo, arguing that their economic roles were being eroded while their taxes continued to rise. They demanded representation in local government, refusing to pay taxes separately from men until their voices were heard. The Abeokuta Women Union's courageous stand sparked a wave of protests that would change the course of history. In 1947, the Women's Union presented a petition to the colonial government, outlining their grievances and demands. The response was overwhelming. 4 women were granted seats on the local council, and the taxation of women was abolished. But what led to this groundbreaking moment? The story begins in the mid-19th century, when the British colonial government began to exert control over Abeokuta, negotiating treaties that granted them trade routes in exchange for recognition of the town's independence. However, this autonomy was short-lived as the British found ways to intervene in the local economy after a political crisis in 1897. The Abeokuta Women's Revolt was a pivotal moment in Nigeria's struggle for independence and gender equality. It showed that even in the face of colonial oppression, women could come together to demand their rights and challenge unjust systems. Their bravery paved the way for future generations generations of Nigerian women to stand up for their rights and fight for a more equitable society. The third major protest experienced here in Nigeria is the Ali Must Go protest, a student-led revolution against military rule. In 1978, Nigeria's military government, led by Olusegun Obasanjo, announced a drastic increase in university fees, sparking widespread outrage among students. The decision, masterminded by Education Minister Amadu Ali, was met with fierce resistance from the National Union of Nigerian Students (NUNS), led by Segun Okeowo. The students, determined to challenge the military government, organized a series of protests, boycotts, and demonstrations across the country. Despite facing brutal force from the Nigerian police and army, the students refused to back down, chanting Ali must go and demanding a reversal of the fee hike. The protest, which began on April 17, 1978, quickly spiraled out of control, with clashes between students and security forces resulting in the death of at least 8 students. The government responded by closing universities, banning NUNS, and expelling student leaders including Okeowo. Although the protests did not achieve their immediate goal of reversing the fee hike, they marked a significant turning point in Nigeria's history. The Ali Must Go protest demonstrated the power of student activism and unionism, showing that even in the face of military rule, young people could come together to demand change. The legacy of the protest lived on, inspiring future generations of student activists and paving the way for the growth of student unionism in Nigeria. Segun Okeowo, the leader of the protest, went on to graduate from the University of Ife and became a prominent figure in Nigerian education, passing away in 2014 at the age of 73. The next major protest in Nigeria was the June 12 crisis, a turning point in Nigeria's history. On June 12, 1993, Nigeria's military ruler, General Ibrahim Babangida, annulled the country's presidential election, sparking widespread protest and international condemnation. The election, which was won by Moshood Abiola, was hailed as a beacon of hope for Nigeria's transition to democracy. But Babangida's decision to annul the election led to a chain of events that would change the course of Nigeria's history. The aftermath of the annulment was marked by violence, protests, and economic instability. The government cracked down on dissent, proscribing media houses and arresting journalists, when the international community refused to let the issue die, with the UK, US, and EU suspending aid to Nigeria and the Commonwealth condemning the annulment. As the crisis deepened, Babangida was forced to resign and an interim national government was established, led by Ernest Shonekon. But Shonekon's government was short-lived as Sani Abacha, a confidant of Babangida, seized power in a palace coup. Abacha's regime was marked by repression, human rights abuses, and economic mismanagement. He banned political activities, dissolved the legislature, and replaced elected governors with military officers. But despite his iron-fisted rule, Abacha's government was unable to quell the protests and strikes that rocked the country. The June 12 crisis was a turning point in Nigeria's history, marking the beginning of a long and difficult journey towards democracy. It showed that the Nigerian people would no longer accept military rule and they were willing to fight for their rights. The crisis also highlighted the need for genuine democratic reforms and the importance of protecting human rights and the rule of law. Moving on to the next major protest that held in Nigeria was the Occupy Nigeria, a nationwide uprising against fuel subsidy removal. On January 2, 2012, Nigeria erupted in a frenzy of protests, demonstrations, and civil disobedience. The spark that ignited the flames of resistance was the federal government's decision to remove fuel subsidies, leaving millions of Nigerians feeling betrayed and disenfranchised. The Occupy Nigeria movement, as it came to be known, was a powerful display of people power, with protests spreading across the country like wildfire. From Kano to Lagos, Abuja to Minna, Nigerians from all walks of life came together to demand justice and reject the government's decision. The protests were marked by creativity and determination, with demonstrators using social media to mobilize and coordinate their efforts. Twitter and Facebook were abuzz with hashtags and updates as Nigerians at home and abroad joined forces to make their voices heard. But the government's response was brutal, with reports emerging of a sinister plot to quell the protests by killing at least one demonstrator. Despite this, the protesters refused to back down, and the movement continued to gain momentum. momentum. As the protest raged on, solidarity demonstrations sprang up in cities around the world. From London to New York, Brussels to Johannesburg, the message was clear. Nigerians would no longer be silenced or oppressed. The Occupy Nigeria movement marked a turning point in a country's history, showing that the power of the people could be a force to be reckoned with. Though the government eventually increased fuel prices again in 2015, the protest had already achieved something significant, a newfound sense of citizenship and resistance that would continue to inspire Nigerians to fight for their rights. The End SARS movement, a decentralized uprising against police brutality in Nigeria. In 2020, Nigeria witnessed a groundbreaking social movement that shook the very foundations of its society. The End SARS campaign, which began as a Twitter hashtag in 2017, morphed into a full-blown mass protest against police brutality, demanding the disbandment of the notorious Special Anti-Robbery Squad, SARS. The movement's slogan, End SARS, became a rallying cry for Nigerians from all walks of life who had suffered at the hands of SARS' abuse of power, from profiling young men based on their fashion choices to extorting, raping, and killing innocent citizens. SARS' atrocities had gone unchecked for far too long, but in October 2020, the tide turned. A viral video showing a SARS officer shooting a young Nigerian in Lagos sparked widespread outrage, and the End SARS movement gained momentum. Protests erupted across major cities in Nigeria, with young people leading the charge. The hashtag End SARS accumulated over 28 million tweets on Twitter alone, as Nigerians and sympathizers around the world joined forces to demand justice. Despite the Nigerian government's initial announcement to disband SARS, protesters remained skeptical, knowing that similar promises had been made in the past without tangible action. The movement continued to grow, with demands expanding to include good governance and accountability. But the government's response was brutal, with security forces killing and repressing demonstrators. International solidarity protests followed, and the movement became increasingly critical of President Muhammadu Buhari's handling of the crisis. The End SARS movement in Nigeria's history showed that young people would no longer tolerate abuse and oppression. Though the journey to justice is far from over, the movement's impact will be felt for generations to come. And now to the last major protest that is currently happening in the country. Nigerians unite against bad governance. Nigerian citizens took to the streets to express their outrage and frustration against the government of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. The End Bad Governance protests, which swept across the northern and southern regions of the country, were a peaceful yet powerful display of people power. Despite the tranquil atmosphere, the protests were marred by sporadic incidents of violence, with security operatives firing shots and tear-gassing demonstrators. The disturbing images and videos of these clashes flooded the internet, sparking widespread condemnation and calls for restraint. The End Bad Governance movement marked a significant moment in Nigeria's history, as citizens from all walks of life came to demand better from their leaders. The protests were a testament to the power of collective action and the unyielding desire to positive change. As the dust settles, one thing is very clear: the Nigerian people will no longer tolerate bad governance. The question now is, will the leaders listen? Thank you so much for joining us on Ebonyi People TV today as we explored the significant protests that have shaped Nigeria's history. From the End SARS movement to the End Bad Governance protests to the Aba Women riots, we've seen the power of collective action and the unyielding desire for positive change. If you feel enlightened by our content, please subscribe to our channel and hit the like button. Your support means the world to us. Now, we want to hear from you. Share your thoughts and opinions on the protests we've discussed. Do you think they've led to meaningful change so far? What more needs to be done to address the issues facing Nigeria? Leave your comments below and let us continue the conversation. Keep watching Ebonyi People TV.
We should keep on watching Ebonyi People TV.
Keep watching Ebonyi TV.
They are very, very good people and they are doing good.
Please, I want to urge you to keep watching Ebonyi People TV.
Am I supposed to be the best? Alright, people. But I don't see them now.
It's a place you be where you get current news and undiluted news.
Keep watching Ebonyi State TV. Not all that die. If you touch, if I come out, I'll come out for that remote.